Welcome to Chasing Curiosity TV. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. The news broke like a thunderclap, reverberating across television screens and social media feeds around the world. It was the kind of story that instantly commanded attention, sending a jolt through governments, analysts, and ordinary citizens alike. Chinese and Philippine vessels had collided near the contested Second Thomas Shoal, a flashpoint in the South China Sea where tensions had been mounting for years. For months, tensions in the South China Sea had simmered, but this was no mere diplomatic spat. This was a violent encounter, a crunch of steel on steel that sent shockwaves far beyond the Spratly Islands, echoing through the halls of power in Manila, Beijing, and beyond. What began as a routine Philippine resupply mission to the grounded BRP Sierra Madre quickly turned perilous when a China Coast Guard vessel moved to intercept, blocking its path in open waters. In a matter of minutes, a tense standoff escalated into a full-blown collision as both crews struggled to maintain control and avoid disaster. The world watched in real time as initial reports painted a grim and chaotic picture, with uncertainty swirling about the extent of the damage and the potential for further escalation. This wasn't a minor bump at sea. Both Manila and Beijing immediately framed it as a deliberate act of aggression, each side blaming the other for provoking the incident. The Philippines decried what it called a dangerous blockade and an attack on its sovereignty, while China accused Manila of reckless intrusion into its claimed waters, fueling a war of words that quickly escalated. The stage was set for a major diplomatic crisis, one that threatened to destabilize not just the immediate region, but also the broader balance of power in one of the world's most critical maritime corridors. Naval commanders scrambled assets to the area, diplomats worked the phones in a frantic bid to de-escalate, and the situation seemed to spiral with every passing hour. The collision was not an isolated event, but the culmination of years of Chinese expansionism clashing with Philippine sovereign rights, a history marked by standoffs, protests, and an ever-growing military presence. For the sailors caught in the chaos, the geopolitical stakes faded behind the immediate terror of the crash. The jolt, the twisted metal, the cries of injured crew members, and the sudden, life-threatening uncertainty. Their ordeal brought the abstract arguments of territory and sovereignty into sharp, personal focus, as fear and confusion replaced the usual routines of life at sea. The world could no longer ignore the consequences of letting this conflict fester. International leaders and organizations scrambled to respond, aware that the stakes had just been raised. The question was no longer if a serious incident would happen, but what would happen now that it had. Analysts debated possible outcomes and governments braced for the next move. Overnight, the South China Sea had become a global flashpoint, its waters now the center of international attention and uncertainty, with the world holding its breath for what would come next. Within hours, the information war erupted. Both nations launched accusations. The Philippines condemned China's aggressive and illegal actions, insisting their supply vessel was on a routine mission within their exclusive economic zone. Beijing countered, claiming the Philippine ship intruded into Chinese waters and ignored warnings. The China Coast Guard released slick, edited video showing the Philippine vessel turning toward them, with audio of shouted warnings. The footage lacked context but aimed to cast doubt and share blame. The Philippines responded with raw, unedited bridge footage, the massive Chinese hull cutting across their path, frantic orders to avoid collision. Competing videos left the world piecing together the truth. In this new era, control of the narrative is as crucial as control of the sea. The battle for public opinion had begun. The footage revealed a stark mismatch. China's CCG 5305, a 4,000-ton cutter, loomed over the much smaller BRP Tarlac. The sheer scale of the Chinese vessel was immediately apparent, highlighting the imbalance between the two ships. The Chinese ship, designed for intimidation and power projection, absolutely dwarfed the Philippine supply boat. Its imposing presence was not just a matter of size, but a clear message of dominance at sea. Chinese video coverage zeroed in on the Tarlac's sudden turn, labeling it as a provocative maneuver. The narrative pushed by state media painted the Philippine ship as the instigator, despite the context. However, maritime experts reviewing the footage saw something different. They noted the CCG 5305 deliberately crossing the Tarlac's path, a textbook intimidation tactic, forcing the smaller ship into evasive action to avoid a dangerous situation. The Philippine footage told a more complete story, showing prolonged harassment. The Chinese vessel boxed in the Tarlac, restricting its movement and escalating the tension at sea. This aggressive maneuver fits China's so-called cabbage strategy, surrounding and intimidating foreign ships with multiple layers of Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels, effectively trapping them and asserting control over disputed waters. The Tarlac's final sharp turn was a desperate attempt to avoid a potentially catastrophic collision. With little room to maneuver, the smaller ship was left with no safe options. The Chinese vessel's aggressive and calculated maneuvering created the hazard in the first place, escalating the risk of an incident at sea. The resulting collision was no mere accident. It was the predictable outcome of deliberate intimidation and high-stakes brinkmanship on the water. The massive size difference meant the smaller Philippine ship inevitably bore the brunt of the impact, suffering damage that the Chinese crew must have anticipated. In the end, the incident was a calculated show of force, a demonstration of China's willingness to use its superior maritime assets to assert its claims and intimidate its neighbors in contested waters. The collision happened at 2nd Thomas Shoal, Ayungin to the Philippines, Renaijiao to China, one of the world's most contested spots. It sits within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, as affirmed by a 2016 International Tribunal ruling. China's sweeping 9-line claim overlaps with the EEZs of several countries, but Beijing rejects the tribunal's decision. At the heart of the shoal is the BRP Sierra Madre, a grounded ship serving as a Philippine outpost since 1999. For Manila, maintaining this outpost is a matter of sovereignty and national pride. China sees it as an illegal occupation and has tried to blockade it, intercepting Philippine resupply missions. The geography is more than a reef. It's a front line in the struggle for control of the South China Sea. Every resupply run is a flashpoint. To determine responsibility in maritime incidents, we turn to the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, commonly known as call regs. These rules form the backbone of global maritime law, providing clear guidance for ships navigating busy and often dangerous waters. Rule 15 is crucial here. In a crossing situation, the vessel that has the other on its starboard side is required to keep clear. This rule is designed to prevent confusion and ensure that every ship knows its responsibilities. In this case, the CCG 5305 approached from the Tarlac's port side. This made the Tarlac the stand-on vessel, meaning it had the right-of-way, and was expected to maintain its course and speed. The Chinese ship, as the giveaway vessel, was obligated to take action to avoid a collision. Instead, it crossed directly in front of the Tarlac's bow, a maneuver that is both dangerous and against the rules. Rule 8 emphasizes the need for early and substantial action to avoid collisions. The CCGG 5305, however, failed to take any such action, ignoring the basic principles of safe navigation. Good seamanship, especially for larger vessels, requires extra caution to avoid endangering smaller ships. This is not just a guideline, but a fundamental expectation in maritime conduct. China later claimed that the Tarlac made a sudden turn. However, Rule 17 specifically allows the stand-on vessel to take evasive action if the giveaway vessel fails to yield, which was the case here. The Tarlac was left with no safe options, boxed in by the reckless actions of the CCGG 5305 and unable to maneuver without risking further danger. Ultimately, it was the hazardous and irresponsible maneuvering by the Chinese ship that created the dangerous situation and put both vessels at risk. According to maritime law and the call regs, the blame for this incident falls squarely on the CCG 5305, whose actions violated international standards and endangered lives at sea. After the collision, the focus shifted to the crew and the damage. Images showed the BRP Tarlac's hull gashed and debris floating nearby. The ship was forced to abandon its mission and return for repairs, a tactical win for China. Thankfully, there were no serious injuries, but the risk of disaster was real. The China Coast Guard reported only minor scratches, highlighting the calculated use of a larger vessel to inflict damage with minimal risk to itself. This is classic gray zone coercion: maximum disruption, minimal escalation. Disinformation followed. Pro-Chinese accounts spread false claims of an oil spill, quickly debunked by satellite imagery. The goal: confuse, deflect blame, and undermine the Philippines' credibility. In the modern playbook, information warfare is as important as the collision itself. The aftermath was a battle for truth. This collision is part of a rapidly militarizing South China Sea. The Philippines has deepened defense ties with partners like India and the US, conducting joint patrols to counterbalance China. Meanwhile, China's military drills and the presence of its warships and aircraft have raised tensions. The U.S. Navy's freedom of navigation operations challenge China's claims, while Chinese forces monitor every move. The USS Ronald Reagan carrier group was nearby, adding to the high-stakes atmosphere. Beyond the South China Sea, China's pressure on Taiwan and the First Island Chain strategy tie these flashpoints together. The collision is a test of Philippine resolve and of its alliances. It's a signal in a much larger strategic contest. The South China Sea is a global artery. One-third of world shipping, over $3 trillion in trade, passes through each year. Disruption here would shatter supply chains and spike global prices. For Japan and South Korea, it's a lifeline for energy imports. If China controls these waters, it gains leverage over key U.S. allies. The region also holds potential oil and gas reserves fueling the territorial disputes. Control of these sea lanes is a military and economic imperative for both China and the U.S. For China, it's about securing a bastion for its navy. For the U.S., it's about maintaining open access. The collision is a microcosm of the struggle for the world's most important waterway. The incident is woven into China's grand strategy, including the Belt and Road Initiative's Maritime Silk Road. Control of the South China Sea is central to Beijing's ambitions. The Philippines, shifting away from accommodation, is strengthening alliances with the US, Japan, Australia, and India. The collision is a test for these partnerships and for US credibility. The future is uncertain. Diplomacy could prevail, but more likely, tensions will persist. China will keep testing limits with gray zone tactics. The Philippines will keep resupplying its outpost, perhaps with more escorts. The risk of miscalculation is dangerously high. A fatal incident could trigger the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, risking direct conflict. This standoff over a rusty ship is now a bellwether for regional stability and the global balance of power. The world is watching what happens next.